guys can thank Alec Gillis for our extra guest tonight. Let's please welcome up Director Jean-Pierre Jeunet. Let's welcome up alien creature designer Alec Gillis, actor Raymond Cruz, visual effects supervisor Pitof. We have the composer John Frizzell, and the miniatures creators and supervisors Ian Hunter and Matthew Gratzner.
A very cool movie from the director of a family. Oh my God.
Thank you all so much for being here tonight.
Very sweet.
And how amazing was that print, my God.
With the distance, it's very gory. It's disgusting.
Well, let's talk about this new vision. Obviously, it took some time before Fox decided to bring another installment, and maybe Jean-Pierre, you and Alec can talk about getting involved and the idea, like, sort of what were the early ideas for how this series could move forward?
In fact, they wanted to hire Danny Boyle at the beginning, and he turned off. And when they called me, I couldn't imagine. They were very courageous. They hired a French director that didn't speak English at all. I understood the story when I received the DVD with subtitles, much less. And it was very courageous because, you know, I made just The City of Lost Children, Delicatessen, but, you know, it was special. And in fact, I made an arty movie. That's I read now, an arty movie. It's not an action movie, it's an arty movie. I replaced a lot of scenes. Action, for example, the nest, when Ripley falls on the nest, it was supposed to be an action scenes. And I changed everything. And they were very open. All my ideas were very open. They were very nice with me. And at this time with Pitof, you remember, we thought, oh, we have a big pressure, they wanted some modification at the editing, but no, we were very free. We had the total freedom, almost like my own film.
Yeah, absolutely. It was incredible because we were really scared. You know, Hollywood, big studios, and coming from a French background, and with the director had the final cut. And yeah, the only issue was the schedule and money. But the only thing we had to fight for, it was incredibly, we didn't have any producer on stage.
Yeah, the boss was Tom Rothman, and I had a producer, Jorge Saralegui. He was from Cuba, Peter Rice from England, and so it was an international producer. And the French director and the French crew, they admit to have my French crew, Pitof, the first AD, my script supervisor, Darius Conji, the DP, my editor, Rehearsals, everybody. It was like a short film with a big budget.
From my point of view, we came in, I remember meeting with Danny Boyle. I believe we had a meeting with Danny Boyle about it. And I don't know what the circumstances were there, but then we heard that it was you, and we were fans of Delicatessen and City of Lost Children, of course, and we were like, this is fantastic. This is really a bold choice, you know? And then we heard he doesn't speak English, and we thought, oh, the studio is going to tear him apart. We just assumed that, to this day, I thought that Fox was very, very mean to you. But they were kind, they were good.
Yeah, but you know, for us at this time, no. We had some pressure at the editing, but for details. And I remember during the first test screening, we had 100 demand for modification, but it was just details. And at some time with my editor, we said, it's stupid, but let's try. Oh, it's not so stupid. So I learned. And after that, with my own film in France, I made some test screening to modify, to understand if we have a problem. So we learned a lot.
And yet you haven't made another Hollywood movie.
No, because I made Amélie. No, I turned off Harry Potter. Maybe it was a mistake. Yeah. That's 5 or 6, I don't remember. Yeah. But I was finishing a very long engagement, I was totally exhausted, and I was supposed to start the next week, so I said, no, thank you. And everything was ready. On Alien, I had the freedom, but for Harry Potter, everything was on the table, the costume design, the production design, the casting, everything. So, it wasn't the same game. My only regret, we couldn't work with Giger, because for some reason, they didn't want to hire Giger. And I met him after, because I said during the promotion, I said beautiful things about him, and he was so happy. And we had an appointment in a very little hotel close to the Champs-Élysées, and he made a selfie with me. I was totally stunned because he was a hero. And it was our reference, you remember.
Oh, yes.
This film has some of my favorite actors in it, and I'm especially thrilled that you cast Brad Dourif, who I just love in everything. Talk a little bit about the cast, what cast was in place, what cast you brought in, and Raymond, how you came to the project, and congratulations, by the way, on La Llorona.
No, thank you.
This guy was very difficult. Why? Because we play a lot of pool with Ron Perlman and him, and he never wants to give up.
It was America versus France.
Never give up. At 4 o'clock in the morning, I pretended to lose because I was tired. No, I had also the same freedom for the casting. We made a lot of tests with the whole Hollywood. It was a dream for me. And sometimes the studio said, no, this guy, no, well, I'm not sure, but that's it. And they never insisted. If I didn't like someone, they never insisted. So it was my casting. And Dominique Pinot, it was a request from Sigourney Weaver. I saw her kneel down in front of the phone asking Dominique to come. He thought it was a joke. And no, it wasn't a joke. So I had my favorite actor in the film.
And,
Santa Claus.
But talk a little bit about finding some of these other actors. I love the fact that Dan Hedaya is in this movie, and it's not necessarily the kind of film that Dan Hedaya would have been seen in. Dan Hedaya?
Dan Hedaya. I am sorry, I couldn't avoid to put some humor inside. Maybe sometimes it's a little bit too funny, a little bit too Coen Brother, the death of Dan Hedaya. It was supposed to be a big scene, very expensive, and I had to find a solution. And my solution, when he takes the rain, I remember during a test screen, because the Fox wanted to cut that scene. They said it's too much, too funny. And I remember I said to Tom Hoffman during the next test screening, let's ask the people about that scene. It was a poker game. And for one time, it was in Las Vegas, everybody laughed, and they said, this is the best scene. And on the airplane coming back to LA, I show the paper to Tom Hoffman, the boss, and the test screening saved my scene. So sometimes it could be nice. It could be helpful for a director sometimes.
Well, Raymond, tell us a little bit about your experience getting started on this film. I heard that the underwater sequence was the first major set piece that was shot. That can't have been
that
easy
was
week.
Really difficult. I think we spent 6 weeks underwater, and it was every day for like 12 hours. And it was a covered set. You would enter at one section, you would have to swim up to a hookah line where you would get air, and they would use light signals. And they'd say, okay, now swim to the back of the theater, like over the back of the theater, there'll be a light there, and someone will give you air. So they would use light cues, we would swim, and then light cue to cut. And at one particular time, we were underwater, and Leland Orser, who is the one with the chest burster that comes out, his diver went to the bathroom and didn't tell him. So Leland was going like this, which means I'm out of air, and he was about to drown. And I swam up to him, and he grabbed the air out of my mouth, and he was a little angry. A little upset. And I remember, I don't even think I was supposed to be in the movie. I met Jean-Pierre Jeunet. Rick Pagano was the casting director, and I came in, and I don't even think there was really a part for me. And Jean-Pierre, I was so excited to meet him because I love his films. And fortunately, he like created this part of the Stefano, the character, to lead everyone through the ship, and that's how I ended up in Aliens. And I mean, how fortunate is that there's very few actors that are actually in an Aliens movie. So I was blessed.
I also heard that, first of all, Winona Ryder was terrified of the water.
Yeah, because when she was young, she had an accident, she almost died. So it was a real challenge for her to swim underwater.
The water scenes were very difficult because they would put milk in the water to make it murky. And you couldn't really, you couldn't, it was like having blurry vision. You couldn't see that well once you launched your mask underwater. And then, you know, we would swim like to lights. So it was frightening. It wasn't, and then the whole set was covered. You could not just swim up and escape. You had to just kind of wait till they brought air to you. So it was dangerous. It was a bit dangerous.
Not for me, I was outside. And I could speak because they had some underwater speaker, but they couldn't answer. This is perfect. This is perfect.
And then we were swimming in uniforms with boots on and carrying a gun. So imagine that. So
When I introduced the film, I called it incredibly ambitious. And I want to just say that the design elements in this film are incredible, but the variety of things that had to be made, you know, obviously there's some CG with the aliens underwater, but so much of this is done with, you know, tangible creatures and miniatures, etc. And I find that design process to be extraordinary. Can you guys talk a little bit about the things that you wanted to achieve, how, you know, what your process was in terms of design to execution? And let's talk first, I guess, about the spaceships and the miniatures, and then the alien creatures and some of the other grotesque things that we see inside the ship.
Just first of all, we have to say the production designer was Nigel Phelps, an English guy.
For the models, we worked with Nigel, and Steve Cooper was the supervising arts director. We worked a lot with Bill Bowes, who's become a production designer much since then. But the difference now, I mean, you see a lot of students and young people in the audience. All the stuff we dealt with was, as you mentioned, was tactile. So we were getting literally like blue line drawings from Jim Martin, one of the concept artists, and then Bill Bowes put together a maquette of the Betty and one of the Auriga out of just blue foam, and it'd be like, okay, here, go make this. And so then we would take it, we would draw vellum drawings. There was no rapid prototyping then, there was no digital modeling for the miniatures, so it was all hand built, and the Betty was about 5 feet long in 32nd scale, and we built an oversized piece for the coupling section. And then the Auriga was a 12-foot long, 1/1000 scale model. I dealt with all the supervision at our studio and as art direction and such, and then my partner Ian dealt with all the supervisory work on set. We used to pair up work, and we had some projects come in that I ended up taking over, and he took over for me. But the thing that was cool was it literally, everything you see in there was like hand built on the model side. We did some machining, obviously, but it was a lot of hand sculpting and a lot of hand fabrication. It was like very old school. I mean, we started a miniature company when CG was starting. What a genius idea, but 95.
And by the way, we can buy the Betty. It's in prop store, and I think the cost is $80,000. Even me, I couldn't buy it.
And let's talk about some of the designs from a conceptual level, because there was some back and forth over what the actual Auriga was going to look like, right? Right up until production started.
It was a vertical design. Originally, it looked sort of like an outboard engine. It was very vertical and had sort of a big sort of top, and then it kind of tapered down. But I guess in 235, it was sort of just cut the.
Yeah, but it was weird. I refused this design.
Then it was changed to a horizontal design, and then that's how it ended up becoming that, what you saw on the screen. But all the stuff was motion control, like the Betty's arms moving up and everything. One really quick detail that a lot of people don't know is when the maquette was built for the Betty, the arms, the engines, they used, if you're familiar with Japanese anime model kits, the forearms of like Gundam or any of the big robots have these sort of big swept back pieces. And so the maquette that was built, those two engines were literally like model parts that were used for the two ends. And then we said, well, that looks pretty cool. And that's what it became. So if you look at it, it actually looks like sort of an anime kind of design.
And how complicated is it to actually work with that on set? I mean, what's the manpower that it takes to make shots like that happen?
We had two stages going in Playa del Rey, one for shooting the Auriga and one for shooting the Betty. And as Matthew mentioned, there's motion control systems which use computers to drive the cameras and to drive the motion on the models. So we could get very slow exposures, because in order to hold depth of field on something that size, to make it look like it's huge, to make the Ariga look as large as it was, we had to shoot at very slow frame rates, almost like shooting still photographs, and then those are all come together. One funny thing though is that by the time we got to stage with the Betty to shoot it, they had not yet finished building the interior of the Betty. So we just had blank windows, and Bill Bowes and I one weekend went down and started sketching what the inside of the Betty was going to look like, because the schedule was such that we had to shoot the model before they were shooting the interior. And so we had to sort of cut holes out and build the inside, sort of parallel to when the full-size ones were being built. But that was probably the most sort of, I wouldn't say it was a challenging thing, but it was an interesting moment, because we had to sort of work parallel with first unit.
Pitof, there's multiple visual effects companies involved in this movie. Tell us a little bit about how you figure out who's going to take over which component, and which part of this was specifically your vision.
Yeah, actually there's a few companies, just like three of them. There's Dubois, which was a French company, who did most of the shots. We had one company who did a few 3D elements, like the bullet and stuff like that. And the aliens, of course, Blue Sky Studio, who were in New York. Yeah, so I mean, the whole thing was to work with and for Jean-Pierre. So I knew Jean-Pierre for many years, and I used to do commercials, and I worked on Delicatessen and in the City of Other Children. So my main concern and my proud was to do exactly what Jean-Pierre had in mind, and it was not very difficult, because everything was storyboarded, everything was very in place. So I just really had to apply, I mean, whatever was to bring Jean-Pierre's vision, and there's just a few CG things. Just it's very the point was to be very organic, but the irony is we start with CG. I mean, all the model. Were previous in 3D. So we had a crew in our facility who would previous everything to make sure that, you know, to facilitate the shooting and to be very precise with everything. And yeah, the only thing which was funny is, I mean, we did the visual effects in a gypsy way, meaning so I brought my crew from France illegally here in the States. Yeah, seriously. And because we wrote a software, a software for Jean-Pierre at the time for the City of Our Children, so we had our own in-house software. So I brought my crew and our software, and then we rented machines. We rented the computer, because at that time we couldn't make, you know, use PC. It was a Second Graphics computer, so a very expensive computer. We couldn't bring that from France. It really, you know, we didn't have suitcase big enough. So and then so we set up an office, really with no sign on it. It was too illegal. And then every 3 months, you know, the crew has to leave the country. So we went to Tijuana, and it's just back and forth. So seriously, with the limo, we get a few guys were in a limo, pass through Tijuana customs, U-turn, and like 5 minutes later, back in the US. That was the good old days. So, and we did most of the effects in a house like that. So we spent the whole year. I did the visual effects and also the second lead director. So I directed a lot of, we had several units. We have the blood and guts unit, which does, you know, all the blood and guts, like all the stuff like that. We had the miniature unit. That was my partner who took care of all the miniature shooting. And we had this amazing DP, Rick Fischer, who did the right stuff. And so he did all the light and everything, and so he had to connect with Darius, because Darius was particular on the lighting, so he had to understand how Darius would light the miniature. And then he turned to be totally crazy to get, you know, the light without shadow, but with shadow. So the whole thing was he bought like black curtain, and he lit with black curtain. So he was like aiming projectors, like thousands of watts of projector against black curtain in order to have this like a light coming from space. So it's a very specific way and crazy way of doing things. Because it was frame by frame, so it was like you could have melted the miniature, right?
He did melt the miniatures.
He melted it.
Yeah, so imagine you've got black wrap, which is heavy gauge aluminum foil that's covered in black. It absorbs light, and then in order to get enough exposure, you need to point lots of light. So 420K, so you have thousands of watts of light pointing at these black wraps, and then you surround the model with that. So you've basically made an oven around the miniature. And then the miniature would get so hot that we actually had to put tubes and air conditioning in the model itself to keep it cool enough when we were shooting it, because it would take hours to shoot a pass on a model. So yeah, that was I forgot about that part.
Yeah. And also one thing, if I remember well, the studio was the Howard Hughes hangar.
Yeah.
And it was built on the marshland. So the ground was not stable, and the motion control was not lined up, and it was like dancing or something. So sometimes we had the mats where in post-production the mat were not lined up exactly with the model, so we had to follow it.
Yeah, we were having like literally seismic disturbances from one day to the next, where the motion control system, which has to be very precise, would be out of alignment the next day, and so the pieces of film would not fit together, which would require us to do more passes.
Yeah, and all mission was like 18, 20 passes. Yeah, something like that. So so the whole look of the miniature was done in post production to combine all the different passes.
So imagine if you're shooting the beauty light, the fill light, a matte pass, each individual light on the model itself. All of these needed to be shot separately and then combined together in post in the composite.
It was fun.
And let's talk about the alien design, because it's really extraordinary what you guys came up with in this film. Let's talk a little bit about the fact that you bring back the alien queen from Aliens, what that process was like, and then how you guys worked together to design what was going to be this final, hybrid alien human being.
Well, for Tom Woodruff and I, having 5 years earlier done Alien 3, which was kind of a return to a single creature, to be given this kind of a playground to expand it and actually explore a little bit more of the morph part of the xenomorph. It was a dream come true for us, and then as I mentioned, we're huge fans of Jean-Pierre, and then to get to work with Pitof as well on set in the second unit, we just had a blast. We had a blast because these gentlemen really embraced the practical aspect of things. It was at a time when digital was really surging forward. We had Jurassic Park, and we were, during the production of Alien 3, my company was also prepping Starship Troopers. And it was like a night and day difference. Starship Troopers, they were very much into the practical stuff, or the digital stuff, and they wanted as little practical as possible. So, we were just not given quite the resources, but this was the opposite. So it was great fun for us. And then also the job had so many different facets to it. We had eggs, we had facehuggers, again, we had chest bursters, we had warriors, xeno warriors, we had the newborn to design. The clones were my favorite. I'm pointing at you, Ian. That was one of my favorite design projects. So it afforded us the ability to bring in really great artists, and we were able to design as a cohesive unit, bring stuff to Jean-Pierre, who had a very specific vision about things, but yet an open mind about where we should take things. And I think for us, like one of the more interesting aspects of it was that because these aliens were tainted with human, the whole thing was she's a human with alien DNA and they are aliens with human DNA, and then the newborn has, a weirder, more decrepit and freakish mix of it all. But the alien warriors themselves, we softened the look of them. We softened the biomechanical look. And then Darius Kanji came in and really said, I have an approach for this that I want to take to make them really look spectacular, but I need you to put much more slime on them. I need slime. So we'd go like, okay, we'd apply our normal slime. It's like, no, it's all coming off. We need it, you need it like peanut butter. So we mixed clear slime that was like as thick as peanut butter, and we'd smear it on so it would hang there. And then he would, wherever he could, he would erect like a cage of fluorescent tubes in all these weird chaotic patterns around it to get all those weird highlights and kicks on it. And that's part of why this stuff looks different than any other Alien film. But there was a lot of experimenting. There was a lot of, it was a very exciting process for us because you guys were not too precious with everything. It was not too, you were willing to take risks. And I think that when I watch it now, I haven't seen it in many years, but when I watch it now, I think, wow, we really did push it, for that time.
Especially the ending. It wasn't easy for you to have the newborn going on the space. And because it was supposed to be in the first script, to be the ending, the death of Dan Hedaya by the Hall. And I changed for something more simple, because for money reason, and they had to finish the ending with the newborn going to the space.
Yeah, we were building the Dan Hedaya death. We had a bunch of parts. You can see it tested. I plug my YouTube channel whenever I get the chance. But we have a YouTube channel, Studio ADI's channel. You can see a whole bunch of behind the scenes of Resurrection stuff, our testing. But we were testing with the Dan Hedaya makeup, and Jean-Pierre came to us. He's like, I think it was because Titanic went over budget, right?
Yeah.
Titanic went over budget, so we had to make some cuts. And he's like, we can't have the death scene that we were, and it's a spectacular death, the way Dan Hedaya was going to die. So let's just apply that to the newborn. And we were like, oh man, we've got some work to do. But it was fun. It was a blast. It was the right decision.
Do you remember, Pitof, we wanted to shoot the blood, some piece of sausages. We were ready to have a small camera, you in a ladder, me shooting underneath, as we could make in France. And no, we had a crew with 40 people, with a specialist of the sausages from ladder.
Yeah, exactly.
We were surprised because everything was amazing. For example, for the spider, a specialist of insect came. Insects are my business, and he had maybe 100 spider on my desk. And when I said, but we will have to kill the spider, he became white because you couldn't do that. And he found a spider death in a natural way. He told me. I swear, true story.
Well, I have to say, as each one of these films has amazing visual design and direction, they each have such beautiful scores. And I am just amazed at how consistently effective and gorgeous the music is. So John, let's talk about how you got the gig, and then tell us a little bit about your process, because I've seen some things where you're doing very unusual work with relatively standard musical instruments, but used in a very unique way.
Well, getting the job, I had seen City of Lost Children and Delicatessen, and admired them beyond pretty much anything I admired. And I had a friend who just said, keep sending my music in, and somehow it came across your desk, I think, right? And we had a meeting, and we spoke, and that was it. We just got going. It was an incredibly exciting experience for me. And I love hearing what all these other aspects of the film, because it felt like that. It was such a big scope and such a big range and such amazing scores. The scores of Goldsmith and Horner and Goldenthal before, and it was such an honor to have that go on from there. I remember going down to the set and seeing the pool and thinking, I'd been working so hard, and then seeing the pool and go, okay, I can work harder. But it was, and and Jean-Pierre, was so enthusiastic and so much fun to work with. There was not a lot of language that we could get between us, and so it was a lot of body language that we would just, if something wasn't working, we would go down. If it was good, we'd have hands up, and we managed to create communication that was probably, in a way, better for music, because you don't need a bunch of words with music. We're working outside of language, and that's what I love most about my work.
And tell us about the instruments you chose to use.
Well, there's a very, traditional orchestra in the sense of a large orchestra. I think it was about 90. There was, I think, about 48 tracks of synthesizers. There was a lot of aleatoric 20th century techniques used on more traditional instruments, super balls. I think a lot of people have seen that video, the super ball. But we used things like that a lot. Rubbing the base of the skin of a large drum, playing stringed instruments in different ways. Sometimes the horns, we would just have the horns, French horns, we'd have just blow air through them and just make strange, almost breathing sounds to just create this uneasiness through things.
And we recorded the music at Sony Studio, and the day of my birthday, 120 musicians play La Marseillaise and Happy Birthday to you. I remember the goosebump.
I want to ask about a few of my favorite scenes in the film. There are many, but my absolute favorite is when the aliens devise their own escape from within the cell. I love that scene so much. Tell us about where the idea came from and how complicated it was to actually shoot.
When they escape from the hole?
When they have to kill
Ask
the third
Pitof,
alien.
he was the director of the second unit and he
Yeah.
made that scene. Yeah. But I modify a lot the script. I put a lot of detail. For example, the stupid gag. I don't remember the cube of whiskey.
Right.
The spider. Because it wasn't my script and I am used to write my own script, it was a challenge for me to bring one idea per scene. At this time, it was a little bit my theme, And we rewrote the ending. We wrote 5 different endings. So I was a little bit a co-writer. But ask Pitof.
Yeah, so Pitof, tell us about shooting that scene.
Yeah, so I mean, the scene, I wanted to make something very organic and very shaky, because one of the main problem was the alien was not able to move very fast, and of course, we had just the space was very tiny, so to make I wanted to make something very speed fast and almost like a blur. So everything was shaking. The alien was shaking. The camera was shaking, and to get just the expression. So my thing was to get the expression of the alien and the action, and the rest was blurs.
Well, it's a wonderful scene because later we see the aliens that are the newborn that has a lot of expressive elements, but I'm guessing working with just the main alien creature design, you get a lot of understanding of sort of how their brain works just from the way it's shot.
Yeah, of course. But before that, before shooting the alien, I made a lot of research of animals, because my thing was to apply as much as animalistic behavior to the aliens, to bring some life and not just try to do animation like move right or left, but try to bring a substance and different layers for the aliens. And so that was my guide for every scene I did, and every shot was trying to feel what animal was inside at this moment inside the alien. And I really went through when we were in pre-production through footage, and I had hours and hours of footage of any kind of animals where they were. I mean, my mix was between insects and feline. So I made a bunch of footage of feline and movement of felines, like big cats, lions, tigers, and all that, and cockroaches, and because to me the aliens were a mix of the two. They had some very feline type of movements, but they were like insects. So I tried to bring the two together.
And from my point of view, when we were discussing looking at storyboards, I was very worried because this was the first time in my experience that we were like having to, like that scene with Brad Dourif looking at the alien, he's looking back at him, they're mimicking each other, all that. The camera is just laying on that alien. He's just sitting there on the alien. And, you know, in the past, you're into quicker cuts on, you know, on these creatures. So we were very concerned about like, because they're guys in a suit, Tom Woodruff Jr. wearing a suit, right? And he's great. But there are times when you have to like give him as much help as possible. So shaking that camera around but Darius's lighting was beautiful too. But that is where, with this one, when I like listen to fan chat groups and stuff, they do refer to this as the beast style of that's what the alien is. They call it a beast. So it's interesting when you say that about going for that animalistic kind of quality. That's and it's a little controversial too, because you have those fans from the '79 Alien who, you know, want nothing to do with the beast mode. Then you have others going, "Wow, they were cool, they were awesome," you know. So
the newborn was very difficult to shoot because imagine it was a torso, the head, the arm, and a big pole in his ass, and a jeep with 4 wheels and 18 puppeteers behind. So it was a big manufacturing. It wasn't easy to shoot. Imagine now, it's so easy with the digital. You know, you ask the people behind the computer, they do everything you want. But at this time, it was very difficult. And it was a big collaboration between us.
and that newborn had it was heavy. It was a big, heavy, you know, because he's 8 feet tall, so his torso is larger than a human torso, and that's where all the hydraulic mechanisms were. You know, just to get him into places, get him inside that sack, that birth sack, when he comes up out of that, you know, that was all a challenge. I think that day when we had the queen and the newborn going, we had at least 20, 25 puppeteers.
Yeah, it was amazing. Yeah, it was incredible. It was 25, like 30 or something.
Yeah, I've never been involved in a bigger puppeteering shot than that, or sequence.
And he was the conductor. So it was
Yes.
incredible because, you know, it was real time. I mean, there's no compositing or whatever. Everything was in camera. So the birth of the newborn was everything. You know, he did. I mean, he was like a conductor and directing the I think it was 30 puppeteers for every.
Let's
movement.
call it 40.
Yeah, that's 40. Yeah, almost 100.
Yes,
It's a round number.
I remember a detail. There is one shot, and the newborn bites, you know, and Sigourney has a reaction. But in fact, it was an accident, something wrong. And Sigourney made a film with gorilla in the fog or something. You know what I mean? So she remembered that shooting, and she knew exactly the reaction when the animal could be brutal.
Yeah, and that's another great thing. It's like, you know, when something goes wrong, that's one of the strengths of practical effects as opposed to digital, that there are unplanned happy accidents that happen. And and for the director to recognize that and go, that's cool, that's a big thing for us. That makes you feel encouraged that you're getting something organic and that you're not pre-planning it to death so that it looks like it doesn't look alive anymore.
Yeah, and
I just remember when I died in the movie, it was 2 puppeteers, each one had an arm, and the hands were covered in KY jelly. And they just slapped me in the face.
Yeah, I was off screen going, you really gotta smack them hard, otherwise it
Yeah,
won't look.
there were multiple takes, I remember that.
And the newborn was very interesting because they designed the guy with a lot of animation, facial animation, in order to be able to give an expression, a physical expression, almost a human expression to the newborn.
And it was what we were going for there was a wide range of expressions so that you could see the change of expression, because our thinking in talking with Jean-Pierre was that he was like a toddler. He was like a child, and one moment he'd be happy or sad, and then the next minute he'd be enraged. But he was deadly and very dangerous. So some of the most interesting shots to me are like when he's looking at Winona and he's trying to get at her, and then he kind of goes, like, yeah, I'm bummed I can't, and then he's pissed again, you know. Those are the fun moments.
We had some reproaches from critics about the eyes because it was new on the aliens. But without eyes, it could be boring after a while because you need to go further and further.
I think that the design of the newborn is amazing. And I particularly love the fact that we actually feel some emotion when the alien dies. I mean, that's the first time in these films that you care, you know, almost as much for the alien in that moment as you do for the people surviving. In fact, I think this is maybe the most emotional alien film because that kind of sort of pathos goes throughout the movie in various scenes. Also, when the newborn kills the queen, it's a wonderful thing that is new, I think, to this universe. I wanted to ask about some of the smaller scenes too, because one of my favorite scenes is a dialogue scene with J.E. Freeman and Brad Dourif and Sigourney Weaver early in the film, where basically J.E. Freeman, who is amazing in this film, basically outlines sort of what they're doing, and it's the scene where you really understand who Sigourney is, who Ripley is at this point. Tell us a little bit about, in the midst of such a huge production, directing a much smaller scene.
You know, I love actors, and Sigourney Weaver was a theater actress. So we were sit down, and she loved to replace the action scene by, you know, comedy scene. And it was a real pleasure to work with her. With Winona Ryder, it was something different. She was, I remember when she had to react in front of the newborn wasn't ready at this time. So I tried to explain to her how the newborn will be. And she said, no, don't be concerned. I will make a variety. And she made it. It looks terrible, it looks stupid. And at the editing, everything worked. And the day after, I said, you were amazing, everything works. And she said, I do just my job. Another approach. Danny Daya, for example, he was used to say, just Jean-Pierre, tell me faster or slower, it will be enough. American actor. But Sigourney was different. She was in pleasure to speak and to talk.
And this film also really brings to fruition Giger's eroticism, I think, in the artwork that inspired the first film. There's a lot of a sort of erotic direction.
Oh yes, and Sigourney was used to say nothing can shock a French. So we push the erotic aspect. I have an anecdote, it's a scoop. I'm sure you remember. We were making something sexual between Sigourney and the newborn, and I said, don't go too far, because the next week it will be worse. And she said, okay, trust me. So the next week arrived, and I remind her, so you told me you will be ready to make something more. And she said, okay. I asked her, do you want I fire everybody on set? No, it's okay. And you know, the alien has 2 jaws, you know. And she made a blowjob at the second jaw. Can you believe it? And nobody saw that. Never. I am the only one. Even my editor, he was shocked. It's somewhere in a negative, in a box, in a bunker somewhere. And nobody will see that. Never.
John, can you talk about composing some of the music that's specifically sort of part of bringing out the sexuality?
Well, we did talk a lot about that, and I think the first scene that we spent a lot of time on was when she is first waking up, breaking through the sort of silk, and her movements are very sensual and erotic. And we talked a lot about opera. We talked a lot about, I think, impressionist music, and just bringing that into the score probably for the first time in the series. Hopefully, we got that across. Representing that type of emotion, you know. I don't know any other way to say it. It's just we talked a lot. We really got into that. It's about how do we make this, and how do we pull that off to make eroticism functional against the horror.
And something very important, during the first meeting, I told him I would like, if it's possible, to keep the few notes from the first one. Doo, 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 doo. Because for me it was alien. The two, 4 notes maybe?
Well, we recorded 2 cues, note for note from Jerry Goldsmith's original score. We got the scores and we recorded them and they're in the film.
Having discussed the underwater scene, Raymond, can you talk us through what was the next most challenging setup for you?
It was really difficult to hold your breath for the long takes. No, seriously, we had to train ahead of time using a swimming pool, and I was in Vancouver shooting the X-Files, where I was playing the Chupacabra, so at night I would just swim laps, and I would just try to stay underwater like as long as I could. So I mean that was the hardest part was it was heated, but after a while when you're in there for so long you get acclimated to it, then it gets cold, and we spent a long time in the water, and then the alien kept sinking. He couldn't swim. Who knew?
Right? Tom in the suit?
Oh, it was a stuntman in a suit, and he would just sink to the floor and just lay there. So they would have to go retrieve him.
And after a while they admit they pee in the swimming pool.
Oh yeah, that's what kept you warm.
What else was complicated for you as an actor?
Well, every actor has a different, physical ability. So, like Winona was terrified of the water, and a couple of other actors, it was really hard on them. Just the practical shooting and getting everybody in the shot and setting up the blocking, and then sometimes you would swim to your mark. You would get there and there'd be no air inside the tank. So you have to turn around and swim back out. And there's no air, and it's like, oh, okay, we'll replace it.
What does Tom think about having to take the alien suit in the water?
Well, Tom, there was very little of the actual alien in the water. There was the moment where the alien grabs Kim. Was that her name?
Kim Flowers.
Yeah, Kim Flowers, and drags her backwards. And that was a big underwater ratchet pull where there was a rope that went to a pulley, and they were dragged back about 30 feet or so back into the darkness. And and then a guy would have to swim out, because you can't have a diver waiting in the back, even though the shot was all soft focus. That was the final funny thing, that it's like, he had to go 30 feet, but it was all out of focus. But Tom would have to go out there and sit there and wait patiently for the guy to come and give him the air, and he was left. He wasn't left there through any incompetence or anything. It's just that when you do it 5 or 6 times, it starts to wear on you, right? But Tom did get hypothermia in that instance, and he had to be taken to a nearby hotel. Sigourney was like, your lips are blue. Get this guy to, and they put him in a hot tub and all that stuff. But we discovered that when you put an alien suit in the water, it looks terrible, because there's no reflectivity on an object when it goes underwater, so all that shine goes away, and then it just looks like a crappy rubber suit. So there's very little practical alien underwater.
Let's talk about the costumes, because this is my favorite Ripley costume. As I was mentioning, we have it on display in the exhibit. But I've also seen sketches from Marc Caro that.
Yeah, at the beginning I thought, I asked Marc Caro if he would have wanted to work with me, but Marc Caro hates the sun and he didn't drive at this time. So LA wasn't for him, definitely. And no, he said, if I don't have the total freedom, I don't want to come. Probably he thought he would be fired after a few weeks. And so he just came to design the look of the character. And in fact, we can recognize just 1 or 2 details. And Bob remade the costume because he was used to make some big action film in Hollywood. But no, we can recognize. And there is another anecdote. Sigourney was very picky with the costume. We fly to New York to present a lot of different versions, and she refused everything. And one day we proposed the costume, and she said, no, I don't want that. The first day of the shooting, she saw Kim Flowers with her costume, and she said, this is the costume I want. And I said, Sigourney, we offered, you said no, I want this costume. So we had to remake the costume very quickly. That's the reason in the film Kim Flowers cries before jumping on the water, just to have her not with the rest of the band because the costume wasn't ready. And sometimes a technical problem, a technical issue gives you a better idea. That's the reason she cries alone, because just because the costume wasn't ready.
But what I like about that story is that it answers this question of Ripley just had this amazing leather outfit just kind of hanging around on the ship, but the fact that it was actually designed for someone who would have brought it with her from another ship makes a lot of sense. What was Ripley's original costume supposed to be?
I don't remember, but it was nothing.
Yeah.
This one is very nice. And by the way, it's on the small exhibition. I suppose you know the exhibition.
One other thing I want to talk about is the great the chest burster death. With Leland and J.E. Freeman. What a fantastic moment in the film.
It's very cool, very sweet. It's so violent, I'm ashamed.
But it's amazing for two reasons. It's amazing when the alien bursts through both of them, but it's that shot down the throat is also quite amazing.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about that from a design and execution standpoint.
I don't remember how you did the mouth. I don't remember.
Yeah, this was one of the fun things you gave us, right? Like, we've never seen inside a human body when, an alien is bursting out. So we're like, that is cool, right? Like, that's a great, like, I don't know why the camera's in there, but that's cool. So we had our chest burster from that we've been using, for all the different, pop outs and all that stuff. And then we had to build an oversized kind of esophagus, leading down into wherever it's going. And it was just a big, like about a 8 or 10 foot long silicone tube that we had suspended by, I think we had clear acrylic rings that held it up because you don't want shadows, if you want to backlight it, don't want shadows. And we just had the creature on a long pole. And as I recall, was it a snorkel lens, or was it, maybe we had to make a slot in the top of it so that you could run a snorkel lens through it. That's probably what it was. Yeah. And then we had to get in there and grease it all up and all that stuff. And so you just have to shoot that 20 times to get the right little part of it. But it was a blast. We also had I don't know if it's in the film. I don't think it's in the film. We had a chest cavity. It must have been when. What's his name, Michael?
But it didn't work.
It didn't work. It was
Yeah,
underwater.
you fucked up.
We fucked it up. We did.
That's the
fuck it
reason
up.
in Big Mac I shot a bullet in the brain because we missed this shot.
Oh, did you do that? Okay, yeah. Well, I'm glad it. Who did the bullet in the brain? Was that a practical?
Some French.
Some French guy.
All right, let's start opening this up. Who wants to jump in? Yes, over here.
Yeah. First of all, thank you all for coming. It's an amazing film. I have a question for Jean-Pierre. What do you think it takes for a director to have prepared so that when he gets on set, he's ready to tackle a scene?
What does the director have to do to prepare so that he's ready to tackle a scene when he gets to the set?
I believe in working hard, so I make a whole storyboard for everything. The whole film was storyboarded. The whole film, every scene, even when they speak. So it's reassuring. It doesn't mean you respect the storyboard. If you find something better at the last moment, you change. But the storyboard is like a freeway. If you want to take a small road in the middle of the country, you can. But if you are lost, you can take back the freeway. It's reassuring. And it's very good for everybody to have a guide because, it's very precise.
Yeah, the whole script was storyboarded. I have a copy of it. It's really cool.
This is for John. Do you have a specific composer that inspired you for this, or is there a piece or a movement that might have led you to the exact?
If there's a specific composer or piece of music that.
Well, I
inspired you.
think Jerry Goldsmith set the tone for the series more than anybody. I think that there's a lot of very abrasive and confusing tension in Elliot Goldenthal's score, which is amazing, and obviously the propulsion of Horner's. So I think you have to go forward, having known those scores so well, I think that there has to be an homage to that you have to come back to it, and I hope I got that across. But I think, you keep that somewhere tucked in your brain, then you go forward as yourself. That's what creating is. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. Was there somebody, Ravel or Mahler, anybody?
I mean, I think at the time, maybe, I probably Bartok, probably Concerto for Orchestra sort of sits in my head, just ruminates. Maybe a little bit with Call's theme, maybe thinking of and Music for Strings, Percussion, and Celeste as well are two pieces that I just hear constantly in my head because I've heard them, but I just adore them so much. So maybe Bartok if I had to go one place.
Cool.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Does anyone want to talk about working with Ron Perlman?
Ron Perlman, he had to make a lot of tests because the studio wasn't sure, and he came with the scar, with the costume, and I think he came 3 times to convince the studio. And we shot, the first day we shot when he throws a knife on the leg of Dominic Pinot, and they were very nice because they saw the dailies before me and they came to say he's great. So it was reassuring for everybody.
Ron Perlman is the nicest man and really funny guy, but the nicest man.
And he plays pool as well.
American team, Ron and I against Jean-Pierre and whatever French guy he had with him, and we would beat their ass. We did it for America. And Dominic and I used to play soccer on the basketball court on the set when they weren't shooting, and it was just me and him, and he hated America. He was like, "This is not football."
And you know the famous anecdote when Sigourney throws a ball from the eye, she made it for real, no visual effect. And Pitof suggests maybe we can make another take. I thought she was ready to kill him.
No, actually, no. The thing is, because when I saw on the monitor that the ball was leaving the top of the frame and going down, and I said, okay, we could cheat the path of the ball so the ball stays in frame and don't go in and out of the frame. And Sigourney told me, you don't do that. But Sigourney, we can a little bit maybe move the frame. No, you don't do that. If you do this, I will kill you. I didn't do it.
Yes.
I was curious about the alternate ending that you shot.
Oh, yeah,
The
because
alternate ending.
in the original script, they were getting dragons flying above some cliffs or something very expensive and a little bit silly. So we wrote maybe 5 different endings, and I couldn't remember, but the last one was cheaper, and when they discover the earth by the window, I have to say it's a retake shot in New York, and Winona Ryder has a wig, and I can tell. And it's a little bit cheap, but it's okay because Pitof found the beautiful stock footage, and we saved the situation. But it was at the last moment, yeah.
Well, and also the effect of the. I saw some of the behind the scenes of how you pulled the alien creature through the window. You would talk a little bit about how difficult that was to design?
Well, the newborn's death was done in stages, so as Jean-Pierre says, everything was thoroughly boarded out, and that's a great thing when in pre-production everybody can sit around and look at the board, suggest new ideas, make tweaks, and then figure out what your MO is going to be. But I think the first stuff we had was the newborn. We had multiple bodies that we built. The newborn, the hero newborn that was the hydraulic guy, against the window, looking back at her. We would just slam him up against the window, and that was nice positive movement because it was very strong, sturdy hydraulics, just to get, and then pulling himself forward, and we would get the performance of him. We'd have the guy shaking the big pole that was coming out his ass, and get that, all that. I think Mark Vignello, right there, right? You were there on set, right, Mark? And you were probably one of the beefy young guys that we had shaking. I know you did it on Starship Troopers, you probably did it on that. But, and then once we got that moment, and then you cut around to the other side, where there was the digital enhancement of the body being sucked out. I think we did have a section of the body that had a piece of monofilament in it with a big plug in it that we could pull the silicone out through,
exactly, yeah.
right, and shake that. And then we were trying to shake everything and make it cool. And then you cut back inside, you cut to reactions of Sigourney. And by the way, I think it's Sigourney's emotions that really amplify the newborn's emotions, which is it always hinges on the people around the actors and how they're reacting to the puppet. And then we had our a couple of different rod puppeted bodies and stuff that would start the process, and an arm would disappear down through the back of the hole, and bit by bit it was all coming. And then we had the great hilarious gut spill, and I don't know, one of you two put the camera down low so the guts just gush out. That's so pleasing for us, because we just love all of that over the top fun stuff. And then ultimately it gets down to just the skull, which was its own little setup that was bolted to the glass, to the plexiglass window, and it had a skin that you could pull from the inside, leaving a segmented fiberglass core skull that you could then pull, so everything's actually happening. And then it was seamlessly blended at certain moments, from one piece to the other. And then cutaways are your friend, we had lots of cutaways. The one thing that disappointed me was when we got that news that Titanic was running over budget, so we had to cut, is that we had a rod puppet of the newborn that was like a 1/3 scale that we were going to use a little bit more to show him kind of moving around. And I always felt, at least, because in my mind that was the plan. And then when that went away and we didn't have the money to finish the puppet and shoot the puppet and comp it and all that kind of stuff, it kind of became, to me it was a little limited in the way it moved. It would sort of appear here and there. But now in retrospect, when I look at it, it's a little like like Ridley Scott's Alien, where they had a problem with that suit, that it was not very mobile. And Ridley had to kind of change the way he shot it, so it would sort of just already be there. And it was like a surprise thing, so it gave you the feeling of stealthiness, and so people could look around like, where the hell is this giant thing, which you probably in real life see, but there it is, in your face. So I was quite pleased with it tonight.
Another very little anecdote, but it's something interesting. It was shot in 35mm, so we had to cut the negative. And at the end, when the Auriga blows up, you have the empty corridor, and if you pay attention, in one corridor, you have the time to see the crew. They are supposed to be in the Betty. They arrive at the end of the corridor. Why? Because the negative editor made a mistake for 2 frames. Or probably she thought, oh, it's an empty corridor, we don't care. But no, look, the crew is alive one more time. Yes?
I want to hear about the inspiration for some of the wonderfully bizarre character moments, like Winona Ryder with the boxing gloves, or Dan Hedaya eating the lemon peel.
Yeah, so you're asking for some of the great character moments, what inspired, for instance, Dan Hedaya with lemon peel, or Winona Ryder with the boxing gloves?
The gloves, I don't remember, but it was an idea from Dan Hedaya to eat lemons, and I said, be careful because it's very bitter, it's lemon. No problem. He was sick. It was very difficult for him. But he started, he has to finish. Too much. He was very professional.
Yes?
You mentioned the controversy regarding the newborn's eye, but I remember reading in the Making of Alien book that there was another aspect to the newborn design that actually got digitally censored from the movie. Can you talk about that?
We talk about the other component of the newborn design that had to be censored.
Oh yeah. And I have a model in my office, and everybody sees that every day. Yeah. It's a weird thing.
Well, let's discuss what that is.
It had a penis. It had a penis, and the penis was kind of nestled inside a vagina. Yeah. And we actually did articulate the penis. Remember, we.
But in fact, it's like him.
So we did have that, and that was going to be that on that. You know, we're like, we don't know where this scene is going between the newborn and the alien. This is crazy, right? But the sexuality is built into it through the script and through Giger. But we have a French director, so we don't know where this thing is going. And eventually, I believe what you said to me at one point, Jean-Pierre, you said it was just too much, and I am French.
Anyone else? Yeah.
What was the rehearsal period like? I'm especially asking for the water scene. Like, did you have to rehearse on dry land first and then go into the water, or was there like not enough time?
How did you do rehearsals, particularly for the underwater sequence?
In fact, with the stunt coordinator, we made some kind of rehearsal on the floor, and it was really stupid to see the people pretending to swim. No, my worst nightmare was the set was big, but not big enough to have the line, because when everybody was swimming, it was packed from the beginning to the ending of the set. And I thought, oh my God, it won't be possible to stay 1 minute and a half or 2 minutes in the same too small set, and we did. But I couldn't sleep during the 5 weeks because it was very scary. And at the end, it works. But sometimes you have a pole on the corner to figure out it was a corner of the room. No, it was just a pole. I cheat a lot for this thing. And the milk and the dust helps because it's more confusing, but you don't see, they always take the same path, the same way.
Yeah, we block it out off just above the ground. We'd block it out, then we'd go in the water, and they would use light cues. And again, like underwater, there was furniture, there was sets, so it was kind of tight trying to swim around everything. It looks roomier than it actually was, but it was like 12 feet deep.
But Raymond was very good underwater because you can see, you open the hatch, the door.
And I sit there, I wait, I'm holding my gun. I think it was 3 minutes.
Yeah, he was one of probably the best to do that.
Yeah.
Yep.
How long did it take for Sigourney Weaver to get into the clone bot that she was on the table?
Oh, the Clone 7. Sorry, repeat the question.
Yeah, so he's asking about how complicated it was for Sigourney to get into the body makeup of the clone that's on the slab.
I think it was about a 2.5 hour process. We had the body, minus the head. The arms were part of the body, and it was on a slant board. It was on a flat board, and she was on a slant board underneath. And so she would start go to get her makeup, and her makeup artist did her look, with the teeth and all that stuff. So she came ready to go, but we had just asked, don't put any makeup on the neck, because we had a appliance neck that would glue to her neck and then into the kind of the collarbone area of the Clone 7. And then, so most of the effort was us blending that appliance. It had to be done in place. And she was very patient. She's great because she's got a great sense of humor, so she keeps things light and she can joke around. And then she just needs a minute to sort of, get into the moment. And you sort of step away and let her do that. And then, it's a challenge because my puppeteers are all underneath that with her. So they're all under there, bumping up against her, and as they're operating, breathing mechanisms and all that kind of stuff. But she's just terrific. You can put her through anything, and she's game.
Yes.
This question's for Jean-Pierre and Raymond especially, but anyone who wants to answer. I'm wondering what attracts you to a script or a story, and what it is that makes you decide, yes, I really want to work on this project.
So what attracts you to a script, and what makes you really decide yes?
When I read the script for the first time, in fact, someone read it for me because I didn't speak English, and I slept. It was very boring for me. But I couldn't resist to Hollywood. It was such an opportunity to make a big Hollywood movie. So I thought, if you say no, every morning when you will shave yourself, you will think you refuse to Hollywood. So I said, in any case, I will be fired after 3 weeks, so let's go. And they kept me, and little by little, you know, to work with amazing people, it was like my own film. And I modified, as I said, I modified some details. It became my story, and it was a big adventure. And I met my wife, she was at the editing. So it was a big, big adventure. For the whole crew, it was an amazing, maybe the stronger year of my life.
Yeah, for me, it was a chance to work with Jean-Pierre Jeunet because I was a huge fan, and also to be in an Aliens movie. You know, a big studio film, alien film, sci-fi horror. So it was exciting to do it. But again, like Jean-Pierre Jeunet, you know, he's directing it. It's like, are you kidding? I'll do anything in the movie.
And for me, the nightmare was before me, Ridley Scott, David Fincher, James Cameron.
Yes.
Jean-Pierre, you were among one of the last generations to have to make film with practical effects, and today we have CG that can make an entire film. If you were to do it over again, would you stick with practical effects, or would you use CG?
Yeah.
Practical effects if you were making the film now, or would you do it with CG?
Yes, definitely. Because when you see the two last Alien from Ridley Scott, the technology is so high now, it's so perfect, you cannot resist. But even if in the last one, probably we have some close-up, some work for you. Yeah. It's always a mix of technology. Yeah. But CGI now, it's so less expensive and so fast. It's a tool, it's just a tool, you know. You will need someone behind the computer to work. It's a human being, you know, will continue to work. It's not a machine.
We talked last week, Alec, about how this has affected creatures in sort of the work that you guys do. I'm curious to hear a little bit about how it's affected miniatures.
Ian, I think you can talk about that.
It has quite a bit, except you do have an occasional director who does like to use practical effects and try to shoot things in camera still, even having the CG available to them. And I got to work on First Man, which was Damien Chazelle's movie, and he insisted on no green screens or blue screens in the whole movie. So all of the shots within the cockpits or the capsules of the space capsules are done against a giant LED screen. And we also built some large miniatures for that and shot those. And so that, but here's the thing though, there is CG in the movie, but the CG is up front instead of at the end. So all the backgrounds in space and much of the views of the Earth seen from the windows were actually generated in CG beforehand and then used in front of the camera. And the one thing about doing it practically, which we found was very advantageous, was the actors and the crew could react to it. The actors could see what was happening, they could act back and forth, and the operators, camera operators, would see something out the window, so they changed their operation. So having something in front of the crew really does change the performance of the filmmaker and the actors.
And I'm curious actually, because I feel like we're going through a moment where there's maybe a bit of nostalgia expressed by fans for practical things in movies, and that's a reflection of the great films that were made by Amblin, Jim Henson, things where even of course the first Star Wars movies, where the fans really fall in love with the aesthetic of there being something there. And please.
Yeah, so you require two things. to do practical effects in a film. You need a director, like Jean-Pierre, somebody who has decision-making, storyboarding, and commitment, and you need to have that commitment follow all the way through to the end. So the challenge today, and Ian was very fortunate to work with Damien Chazelle because obviously, those were all practical effects. But the challenge with practical work now is that one, directors are controlled a lot by the studios, and the studios also want to control the finished film all the way to the end. And if you're building miniatures and photographing them, you're kind of stuck with it. Like there's shots in the movie, like also that observation room with the big thing. That was a 6-scale model. It was about 30 feet across because it was just too big to build full scale. And those were decisions that were made way in advance. And films now, because it's a little bit of a more, and again, not knocking today's filmmaking, but it's more corporate, so you have a lot more on the line. And it's very hard to do practical work, and certainly Alec, you can speak to this on the creature side, but they're tweaking stuff in post a lot. And so if you're shooting a bunch of models and they're like, we'd rather have it look entirely different, it's gonna get replaced. So I think the fans do want to see that. And we're always talking to people about, why don't they do more practical? I'm always asked that, why don't you do more practical work? It's like, it's not really up to us. And there are a lot of directors who want to do it, but sometimes they just don't have the ability to make those choices.
I just did a movie with a practical La Llorona, and the monster herself, she was an actress who played the character. So for us as actors, it was amazing to have her there to play the scenes off of. And for the tone and the atmosphere in the film, the only CGI was at the end of the movie, really. So it was great to have that, especially for an actor.
And we have less pre-production time now too for the big, like makeup is doing very well these days because and that's where you get a lot of the practical approach, and fans love that, and it's critical for horror too, to not be knocked out of the reality by something that looks like a beautiful graphic. But we just don't get as much pre-production time, so there is less ability to build special fun things that you can test, So.
Yes.
Obviously, this film puts a lot of energy into resurrecting the character of Ripley, and I have to assume the studio anticipated following these characters, with more sequels. So, was there any discussion on set about what might happen in the next film after, in Alien 5?
So was there discussion of what might happen after in an Alien 5?
Yeah, about the ending on Earth, because in a previous version, we were supposed to finish on Earth, but it was too expensive. I imagine a kind of trash for old spaceship, and it was very expensive, and so we forgot that. So. But yeah, of course they were thinking, and there is another ending, very bad. It's on the Blu-ray or something, and they are sit down on Earth. It's so cheap, but it would have been an opportunity to make another film on Earth, of course.
Yes. So making a what?
Sorry. How is it different working in Hollywood after making
Working in Hollywood after
we
making
were
films.
904 people on Alien. In France, we are maybe 40. But on 904 people, I knew probably 15 people. We were too much. It's too much. And I remember sometimes the special effects in live, they were 80 sometimes. And I remember one time I was in the darkness to look for an idea, and suddenly I could hear. It was a guy sleeping because he had nothing to do. It was too much,
Let me ask a follow-up. What did you take from the experience of making Resurrection that you found useful when you went back to France?
In France, it was between friends, and the union in USA is very tight, and you cannot, for example, you can pass. If it's 12, you have to finish. You have the grade. You can ask the grades for 12 other minutes. In France, it's cooler. It's cool. Everybody helps everybody. You are between friends. It's a different game.
Yes.
So you went to America to make this movie. You didn't speak English. So what is it like as a director?
I had an amazing interpreter. She was translated in simultaneous. It's like subtitles. But after a while, you would have to say, "Can you shut up? We are speaking." You know. And I discovered her for the promotion of the Theater for Children. She was amazing.
Raymond, what is it like to have a filmmaker that doesn't speak your language?
Well, you know, I think it was a very fluid setup because I didn't even remember that Jean-Pierre didn't speak English. I mean, that's how easy it was, and his translator was a really nice lady. But yeah, and he communicated everything very well. You know, we didn't have any problem at all.
Even today, I don't speak English. I pretend.
Yes.
I remember him when we were playing pool. He said, "You cannot do that job."
My question is for Jean-Pierre. How much of Joss's original script do we actually see in the final cut? And when you made the changes to his script, did you work at all in collaboration with him, or was that like single-handedly making the changes to his script?
So how much of Joss Whedon's script is actually the film that we see? And when you made changes, did you work collaboratively with Joss?
No, I work doing the process of the storyboard. And except the ending, we changed the ending because it was a question of money. And I add some details. It was some details and some small, my humor. For example, Daniel Daya, to open the door, stupid joke, it's me.
All right, let's take two last questions. One over here.
How was it working with Mason Dominique on a wheelchair, and whose idea was it?
This is another personal idea, to have the chair hiding the gun, you know. And for the design of the prop, it was a pleasure to design the chair, because you couldn't imagine you have a weapon on it at the beginning.
And does
The chair worked really well. I mean, the sets were wide enough we'd go through, but the chair worked really well. And Dominique was great.
Is there a final thought out here? Okay, so I'm sorry, wait. Okay, now we've got to, yeah.
Yeah, my question is that for each one of you, what's your personal favorite death from the movie?
Personal favorite deaths in this movie.
They're all very delightful. The only story I can tell you is that I'm originally from Miami, Florida, and I told my mother, I said, "Oh, you guys see this is the thing I just finished? It's great." Not really thinking about what it is, and she took her friend, and at the time I guess she was in her 60s, she's no longer with me, but and she called me. She's like, "Why are you telling me to see these movies?" I'm like, "Well, that's why I work. It was really great." So I see that's all I can think about is my mother sitting there mortified at like people getting their heads blown apart and everything else. So all the deaths are great.
I love the Brad Dourif's death because for me it was like an egg, boiled egg, you know. This is a brain. And I love him because they scratched the head. It was such a pleasure to kill everybody.
I can tell you, I didn't like my death. I kept getting slapped with KY jelly. Did I mention that?
We had a great rig for the back of your head. We had a fake head of you, and we had all these brains and stuff that we were thinking, like, how do we get this? We want it to come right at the camera. How do we aim this? Like, is it air? We just put like monofilament fishing line on all the brains and just yanked it right towards the camera. But it's cut so quick. It's like a 6-frame moment. But that was a fun one.
Anyone else want to add to that?
It's not a death, but one thing you guys don't know is when Dan Hedaya is giving all that money to Michael Wincott, he says he's really hard to get a hold of. The guy on the dollar bill or the money is Bill Bottolato, the producer, so that's why it was so hard to get
that money. We should wrap up, but I wanted to say that we were talking about doing a group shot, right? Is there a way we could do that with our special friend in the end of the stage? Let's take a big group shot.
Before we get up and do that, can I just tell you personally, for me, because I've been involved in 3 of these screenings. This has been a blast, and you guys have really done a terrific job putting this whole thing together. As a way of paying tribute USC. I brought a letter that I got from the USC Film School in 1979 that changed my life. It goes like this: Dear Mr. Gillis, the selection committee has unfortunately declined. And this is and it goes on from that. But I'm just really thrilled tonight to be here at the Lori Loughlin Theater. No, seriously, I'm not trying to make a game. You did a great job, Alex. Thank you so much for including me.
Thank you guys so much for joining us tonight, sharing all of these stories, flying out here from Paris. This film is amazing, and I'm really glad that we got to share it with so many students here tonight. Thank you. Thank you.